everybody. Chris McCabe here with another Amazon suspension trend, account appeals for reinstatement. Seen our share of interesting things from summer into fall, but generally speaking, I want to speak to account health reps calls that people have done where they're kind of blindly trusting whatever they're told on that call without regard or consideration for the fact that the quote unquote advice they get might do more harm than good. It might not be useful. In some cases, it doesn't really do anything. It's neutral, but of course, that isn't what you need when you're trying to advance a reinstatement appeal. So I'm still talking about this in public and private forums, trying to get people to understand that it might take more than one call with account health. I always say take what they say with a grain of salt. Try to get into specifics or details. I think a lot of people are sitting back and letting the account health rep guide the call, and they're being very passive about the information they receive. Question what you hear, but also get into specific facts and details. And if you get a message that says, oh, we accept prior parts of your last appeal, but there's one or two things left, make sure you don't just dive right back into the same cycle of getting more copy and paste messages, which ask you for everything all over again, right? If you've truly made progress in the appeals process and they're only asking for one more document, one piece of info, whatever it might be, a policy violation, performance or operational failures you've had that you didn't address in time to prevent flag and account suspensions, or a message from the account health assurance team, if you're in account health assurance, telling you 72 hours to fix something and appeal it, and then you provide that appeal. If it gets pushed back to you for any reason, and we all know that they're very, very reluctant to share the reasons for denials. Last Amazon Accelerate, we heard some rumblings that they might finally be opening the door and just a crack to letting you know just some details, some information around why appeals are being rejected, not just to show a bit more transparency on their side, but in recognition on their side of the fact that when appeals are just getting rejected with the same template over and over, you're not learning anything, you're not being told anything. There is a lack of transparency on their side, but beyond that, it's not helping advance this process at all. They're creating more work for you, they're creating more work for themselves. It's completely kind of nonsensical and inefficient for them to just send you in extra circles. Most sellers who are suspended are going to ultimately be reinstated anyway. So why not get to the point within a few days instead of a few weeks, or at the outside a few months? I think at this point, sellers, consultants like me, Amazonians, I think at this point, everyone understands that there are gross inefficiencies all the way through this process, not just the appeals process, but also the process of having you call in, speak to account health reps whose hands are tied behind their backs in terms of what they can guide you on, what they can share with you. Maybe most of the improvement on those teams will come in 2026 and not right now. But the bottom line is everyone knows these things have to improve. Just giving templated copy and paste information verbally on a call and through a message through Seller Central, it's kind of the same thing, right? The outcome is less than desirable. You know that you're probably going to have to go through 5, 6, 7 extra steps just because there's really no information to be shared with you. Well, what that means and what that tells me is that when you're on these calls, hopefully with US-based reps, but with anyone globally, you're going to have to run that call. You're going to have to push for the right kinds of details. Sometimes they just flat out tell you the same exact thing you heard on the last 2 calls. I don't know if they're just parroting or reading from annotations in front of them from previous calls with account health reps, knowing that no one's really going to catch them in the act of kind of dropping the ball and not doing what they're supposed to do, but they are doing it on numerous calls. You've heard them, I've heard them, people at Amazon have listened in on some of those calls, and they know that additional steps are required simply because they're taking people in circles in a knee-jerk reaction where there's real work to be done and they're kind of just going back through the motions of what the previous person did. It's unfortunate that that's continued on into year 3, year 4 of account health management, but that's the reality we're living with today. It means the burden isn't on their shoulders, it's on yours to drive that call, to get some meaningful info. If they tell you this is private, there are things we can't share, but what is the point of that call? what is the point of making account health reps available to you if everything's a secret and nothing can be shared? Then there's no point to that interaction. So that means you have to make it a viable call. And if you cannot get it from that one rep, I mean, certainly don't waste 30, 40 minutes with them repeatedly putting you on hold and then coming back and just regurgitating the same generic copy and paste mental content. I mean, that doesn't have any value for anybody. Disconnect, try again with a different rep. But if you're not going to be told how to revise the next appeal, and sometimes they will simply tell you that there's a document missing or that there's one particular area of focus from your last appeal that you didn't address properly. Don't assume that everything you've submitted is perfect. I mean, you've probably got some improvement on your side as well, especially if you've decided to run the whole appeals process yourself without expert eyes like mine on it. Then you've kind of assumed the burden of not only crafting a better appeal, but also managing and running the account health call in a more fruitful, productive, and practical way to get at those solutions and to be able to document them. Because it could be, as it is in some instances, it could be that simple where you simply haven't clarified one or two pieces of information. You haven't been clear enough on how you're going to improve one or two steps that perhaps weren't executed properly in the past. It could be almost anything. It could be that you had the wrong personnel working on something. Maybe you were relying on a VA who, kind of mailed it in and didn't really do the job. And you asked them for certain information you needed for the last one or two appeals, and they didn't really come back with anything important or useful, and you kind of just winged it from there. Obviously, you're setting yourself up for failure when you do things like that. And that's not the fault or the burden of somebody on account health teams. I mean, that's your own internal operations that are at fault. And there's a lot at stake with an account suspension, right? That's not the time to kind of chat GPT your way to success and to fail to take the appeal reinstatement process seriously. You have to understand that Amazon is going to offer you a degree of help, but it might not be helpful help. You might have to create your own help within the help by managing that interaction with account health teams. And again, going back to the point I made earlier in this video, not assuming that every info they give you, every piece of info isn't gold. Some of it might be mixed. It might be generic. Maybe they're repeating something they did in a previous call, somebody else they talked to earlier in the afternoon, earlier in the day. If you feel like you're getting scripted content, again, you're wasting their time, they're wasting your time. That's time you could be spending working on an appeal escalation. It could be time on a different call with account health reps, or even interacting with other Amazonians if you have contacts like that from the past, or if you met them at an event or a conference. These are important strategic decisions you make, as opposed to just rote exercise. Well, I talked to somebody else. They told me to write it this way. I wrote it that way. It got rejected, of course. I went back, called account health, got totally different advice in a totally different direction. I followed their advice to the letter. That got rejected. Couldn't find out why the second appeal was rejected, so I called back again. I mean, this is the definition of insanity, right? You could theoretically talk to account health reps all day long, rewrite things all week long, and get rejected 4 or 5 times in the span of a handful of days. You're not reinstated, you're not selling, you're losing that revenue at peak sales period times of the year like Q4 or any of the prime days, anything like that. You're costing yourself even more revenue simply because you're listening to everything you're being told, assuming it's 100% accurate, assuming that all you have to do is sit back, relax, follow all of their directions, and you'll be reinstated. If that were the case, all it would take would be 1 or 2 calls to account health, a couple of rewrites. Nobody would need people like us. Nobody would need a strategy. Nobody would need to hands-on manage their interactions with account health teams, and everything would be bliss and nobody would experience the pain points we hear about. So my recommendation, of course, is to think before you act. Don't blindly submit 2 or 3 appeals based on what your buddy did, what your friends did, what somebody at some event you met did. Make it tailored to your specific situation, but also tailor it around details and specifics that you squeeze out of those account health rep calls. And again, assuming that you're looking with a skeptical or critical eye on any of the information they give you, because for all you know, they could be parroting something they told someone else earlier in the day. They could be hustling you off the phone because they've just had enough for that one call. You need to ask questions. You need to be involved. You need to take an active, not a passive role. And you certainly need to not blindly trust everything that you get. You could be speaking to anyone from a rookie amateur account health rep to somebody who's been around for 2-3 years and who's kind of had enough of seller conversations, or anything in between. So take that interaction seriously. If you need help interpreting or translating any of the information you get on those calls, I'm always around for that. And we're interacting with these types of situations all the time. We've always got words of wisdom or advice for you if you're struggling with any of it. So thanks again for listening to this suspension trend video. We'll catch you next time.